Congratulations. You joined the most feared organization in the ninja world. You've probably heard Akatsuki was the most feared organization in the shinobi world. That's not really true. Feared, sure, for about 5 minutes at a time, because almost every single member of this organization died in a way that ranged from tragic to almost comically pointless. 10 S-rank criminals. Give or take a tree clone or two. 10 different ways the universe decided they'd overstayed their welcome. And honestly, the group that was supposed to reshape the world couldn't even keep its own members alive long enough to see the plan finished. That's the real Akatsuki story, not conquest. Attrition, one funeral at a time. Let's start with Sasori, a puppeteer from Sunagakure who got so obsessed with the idea of permanence that he hollowed out his own body and replaced it with a mechanical puppet shell, a human core no bigger than a torso, wrapped in wood and steel and poison-tipped tricks. Immortal by design, he spent decades collecting the corpses of powerful shinobi and turning them into weaponized puppets, running an entire criminal empire from inside a disguise, while his home village assumed he'd been dead for years. And here's the thing, the plan worked. For a very long time, right up until Sakura and his own grandmother, Chiyo, cornered him in his hideout. Chiyo, the woman who raised him before he abandoned humanity for hardware, was the one who ended it, driving her chakra threads straight through the puppet shell and into the small, fragile heart still hiding inside. The man who turned himself into an unkillable weapon died because he never actually stopped being human underneath the paint job. Poetic, also deeply embarrassing if you sit with it for more than 5 seconds. Then there's Deidara, the explosion artist, a missing nin from a Wagakure obsessed with the idea that true art is fleeting, that beauty only means something in the second before it's destroyed. Somewhere in the universe's writing, someone decided that philosophy was also going to be his obituary. After a brutal fight with Sasuke Uchiha, a fight he was losing badly, Deidara made one last desperate move. He detonated his own body from the inside, a suicide bomb built into his own chest, trying to take Sasuke down with him in one final masterpiece. Sasuke escaped using a substitution jutsu at the last possible second. Deidara did not have a plan B. Congratulations. You spent your entire life insisting explosions were the purest form of art, and then you became your own final exhibit, playing to an audience of nobody, because the one person you wanted watching walked away clean. Hidan is where this stops being tragic hero and starts being cosmic comedy. A zealot from a small, obscure village, devoted to a bloodthirsty deity, immortal through a curse technique that made conventional death irrelevant. Decapitation, dismemberment, none of it works when pain is the whole point of your religion rather than a deterrent. Shikamaru Nara didn't even try to kill him. He didn't need to. He blew Hidan's body into pieces, buried each piece in a separate, unmarked location, and left him fully conscious, fully immortal, completely immobile, sealed underground indefinitely, with no way to move, speak, or ever be found. Not dead, just endlessly, silently aware, forever in the dark. And honestly, that might be worse than dying. Immortality was supposed to be his reward from his god. Instead, it became an eternity of nothing, which is the kind of irony you genuinely cannot plan for. Now here's a question worth pausing on. What do you do with a man who literally cannot be killed? You don't kill him. You just remove the being seen or heard by anyone ever again part. Kakuzu, Hidan's partner and one of the oldest members of Akatsuki, took the opposite approach to cheating death. Instead of a curse, he collected hearts. 5 of them, stolen from powerful shinobi he'd killed, stored in his own body like spare batteries. Each heart granted a different elemental affinity, letting him swap abilities mid-fight, depending on which organ happened to be doing the work that day. Nearly a century of survival, built entirely on outlasting everyone else. Kakashi Hatake ended it with a single lightning blade, driven straight through the last remaining heart before Kakuzu could rip it out and swap it for a fresh one. Turns out 5 spare hearts don't help much when someone moves faster than your swap out time. 100 years of preparation, beaten by half a second. And then the tone shifts because not every death on this list is a punchline. Itachi Uchiha's story is the one that actually earns the word tragic without irony attached to it anyway. Picture being handed an order that guarantees you'll be hated by your entire village, your little brother, and history itself, and choosing to follow it anyway, because the alternative was a civil war that would have killed thousands. That's Itachi. He committed the massacre of his own clan under direct orders, sacrificing his family, his reputation, and his brother's trust to prevent that coup. He was already dying of a terminal illness by the time he fought Sasuke one final time, a fight he deliberately lost, using his last strength to implant Sasuke with exactly what he'd need to eventually take down their real enemy, Obito. His heart simply gave out mid-battle, his body reaching its limit before the fight could resolve on its own. He spent his entire adult life orchestrating a silent apology his brother wouldn't understand until years after he was gone. No other death on this list gets framed as an act of love. His does, which somehow makes it worse, not better. Nagato's story asks a much bigger question. What happens when grief gets old enough to turn into ideology? Known through most of the story as pain, he grew up in a war-torn border village, watched both his parents die in front of him, and built an entire philosophy out of that grief. That shared suffering was the only force strong enough to unite a fractured world into lasting peace. He leveled an entire village just to prove the theory correct. Then Naruto talked him down, forcing him to confront the fact that his war had produced nothing but more of exactly what he'd started. Nagato, physically ruined from decades of using a technique that borrowed life force straight from his own body, used the very last of it to revive everyone he had just killed. He died slumped against a tree, completely spent, having devoted his entire existence to a version of peace that only ever made sense inside his own head. Congratulations. You built a god complex out of childhood trauma, and your final act on this earth was quietly undoing your own greatest achievement. Conan's ending gets remembered as a quiet one, but there's a twist buried in it that most people miss. She was Nagato's closest friend since childhood, the last person who actually understood what he'd been trying to build before it all went wrong. After Akatsuki collapsed, she didn't run. She turned against Obito directly, transforming her entire body into thousands of sheets of paper, ready to detonate herself just to slow him down. And it didn't work. His intangibility let him pass straight through the blast without a scratch. Here's the part that actually stings, though. Konan wasn't fighting for Akatsuki. She was fighting to protect the memory of what she and Nagato had once believed peace could look like, from the one man who twisted it into something unrecognizable. She lost, but she's the only member on this entire list who died trying to undo someone else's damage instead of cleaning up her own. That's not a flat death. That's the closest thing this organization has to a hero's end. Kisame Hashigaki's ending doubles as a genuine character study. Cornered during the war and facing near certain capture and interrogation, he chose to dissolve his own body into a horde of water-clone sharks rather than risk being taken alive with village secrets still in his head. A man built almost entirely around the concept of loyalty, quite literally consuming himself so nothing useful could ever be extracted from what remained. Clinical, self-inflicted, and somehow the most dignified death in the entire organization. Now, Zetsu is the one everyone assumes is boring. Half plant, half clone, more plot device than person. But sit with this for a second. Zetsu was grown from the cells of Hashirama Senju, one of the most powerful shinobi to ever exist, and his entire purpose from birth was to spy, manipulate, and serve as Obito's personal information network. He never got a childhood, a village, or a single choice that was his own. During the war, thousands of white Zetsu clones are mass-produced and slaughtered without a second thought, treated as disposable foot soldiers rather than lives. The original consciousness eventually gets absorbed into a larger scheme and discarded the moment its usefulness runs out. And here's the actual gut punch. Zetsu is the only member on this list who never got the chance to want anything for himself. Every other Akatsuki member chose their own downfall. Zetsu never got a downfall. He just got deleted once the plan was finished with him. That's not a boring death. That's the most disturbing one on the list, precisely because nobody in the story even pauses to notice it happen. And finally, Obito Uchiha, the man quietly responsible for a large share of everyone else's suffering, operating under Madara Uchiha's name and identity for years before finally revealing himself as the true architect behind the entire war. After his plan collapses and Naruto reaches him emotionally rather than through force, Obito experiences a genuine change of heart in his final moments. He uses what's left of his strength to save Kakashi's life and hand Naruto the tool needed to actually save the world instead of ending. He dies leaning against a tree, a recurring image on this list, apparently. Calm, having spent his entire adult life trying to build a fantasy world to escape a grief he never once let himself process. Congratulations, you orchestrated a global war to reshape reality around your own unresolved trauma. And your very last act was quietly admitting to yourself that it was never actually going to work. 10 members, 10 completely different philosophies about pain, power, and what any of it was supposed to mean. Sasori wanted permanent immortality and got a childhood memory instead. Deidara wanted his death to be a masterpiece, and it happened in front of exactly no one who cared. Hidan wanted to serve as God forever and got buried alive as the reward. Kakuzu wanted to outlast death indefinitely and lost to a man who was simply faster. Itachi wanted forgiveness. He never lived long enough to receive. Nagato wanted lasting peace and only found a personal version of it in his final breath. Konan wanted to protect a memory and died the closest thing to a hero this organization ever produced. Kisame wanted loyalty to mean something and proved it by disappearing entirely. Zetsu never got to want anything at all, and that somehow is the saddest ending. Obito wanted an escape from grief and discovered, too late, that grief simply doesn't work that way. And honestly, that's the actual thesis hiding underneath every single one of these deaths. These weren't just S-rank criminals with terrifying jutsu and matching cloaks. They were people who each constructed an entire belief system to cope with something they couldn't otherwise fix, and the universe kept sending them the bill anyway, usually with interest. Power doesn't buy you out of consequence. It just delays the invoice. So here's the actual question worth sitting with after all of that. If you built your entire identity around one belief just to survive your worst pain, would you even recognize the moment it started working against you? Drop your answer in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one.